Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick and this is our review of the Suunto Run. Suunto Run is a new entry-level running watch that sits in the Suunto range beneath the Race and Race S. It's primarily aimed at runners and it costs £199 in the UK and $249 in the US. So it is a low price, like it undercuts all of the competition out there really. Actually in the UK it's even cheaper than the Coros Pace 3, which is not an AMOLED watch. But if you're looking at the other more affordable AMOLED watches, it's considerably cheaper than the Coros Pace Pro. It's cheaper than the Garmin Forerunner 165 music version. This does have music. And obviously Suunto's own Race S is also more expensive than it. So it's definitely going to be very competitive on price, and you've got a lot of features in here as well, packed into what is a very lightweight design. It's mostly plastic, although there is a steel bezel running around the outside of the screen. That screen is made from Gorilla Glass, and it comes with a nylon strap as standard, which contributes to the very lightweight. The watch is just 36 grams with a nylon band, 36.5 grams when I weighed mine, although the strap might have been a bit wet at that time. You've got a 1.32 inch AMOLED touchscreen display. That is the same display that you get on the more expensive Suunto Race S. The watch has 3 buttons, one of which is a digital dial as well, and you can also obviously use the touchscreen to navigate through the menus. In terms of the sensors on the watch, you've got the same Sony GPS chipset as the more expensive race models, which means you are getting very accurate dual-band GPS on the Suunto Run. You've also got a new heart rate sensor on this watch. That's meant to be an upgrade on the ones on the Suunto Race and Race S. It's waterproof to 50 meters. You've got the usual sensors on board, including a pulse oximeter and a barometric altimeter, and you can connect to external sensors via Bluetooth. You can't connect to cycling power meters. That's a feature reserved for the more multi-sport focused watches higher up the range, but you can connect to heart rate sensors, headphones, and indeed running foot pods. Say headphones because this is a Suunto watch with music storage. Now this is just drag and drop storage. It's MP3 files only. It's not the connection with streaming services that you get with Garmin watches and smartwatches, but you can now drag and drop music files and listen to them on the Suunto Run with Bluetooth headphones without needing your phone with you. You get 4 gigabytes of storage to put all that music on. That's not as much storage as you get on the Race S and Race, because the Suunto Run does not have access to offline maps like those watches, which take up a lot of storage space. You do get breadcrumb navigation with turn-by-turn directions on the Suunto Run, but you aren't getting those full offline maps. Another thing you don't get compared with the pricier Suunto models is Suunto Plus apps that you can load and use as extra data fields during workouts and that kind of thing. But you can create interval workouts in the partner app and follow those on the watch. You've also got a new track mode on the Suunto Run, which is similar to the ones you get on watches from Garmin and Coros and Apple, which basically uses an algorithm to recognize the length of the track you're running around, and you can set which lane you're in to get very accurate distance and pace stats if you are running on a track. Haven't had it confirmed when that's going to be coming to the more expensive Suunto models. You'd hope it'd become a standard feature across the range, but for now it is here on the Suunto Run. When it comes to battery life, you're looking at up to 12 days in watch mode and then 20 hours of GPS tracking in the most accurate mode that uses dual band GPS. Those numbers will come down if you are using the always on screen though, and if you're listening to music on your runs, that will also hit the battery life pretty hard.
So I've been using the Suunto Run since the London Marathon, so 2 or so weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. And the biggest thing I think to like here is the bang for buck value. This is a really smart move from Suunto, dropping in a watch that undercuts a lot of the rivals on price. Even to a certain extent, it's undercutting its own kind of stablemate, the Suunto Race S. What you get for the money is it's basically a really top value watch with a lot of firepower. You've got an AMOLED display, that multi-band dual frequency GPS. You've got offline music storage, though not Spotify. There's a really good range of training tools, pretty comprehensive, cover most runners' needs. It's all in a pretty slick, light package. In fact, it's basically a Suunto Race S, which was a good value watch in itself, but for less. Now, I like the design, like the Forerunner 165 and the Coros Pace Pro. It's really nice and light. It's very wearable 24/7, so you can get those kind of health insights. The Suunto Run has shaved a bit of the weight off the Race S, particularly if you go for the nylon strap, which now comes in at 36 grams. That's one of the lightest watches out there. Overall, it's also good looking. That lightweight design really works. It's a little bit plastic in terms of the feeling that you get from sort of more affordable watches, but it does avoid looking or feeling too cheap. And I think it's easily as slick as the Garmin Forerunner 165 or the Coros Pace Pro. I like the bright sporty colour options as well. The nylon strap is a big tick for me. I think that always is a positive. Helps make this one of the lightest wearable watches going. Though fitting the strap was initially sort of fiddly. There's a pin in the box that is really quite easy to miss. So if you buy this, watch out for that. Now, There's a bit more screen real estate than the Forerunner 165 as well, though you can only have a max of 4 stats per data screen. You're getting the same AMOLED display as you're going to get in the pricier Suunto Race and the Race S, which is bright, it's easy to read. I found the touchscreen smooth and snappy enough, no problems there. Comparatively good performance compared to the other AMOLED watches that I've tested around this kind of price point or even a bit higher. Battery life isn't world beating, but it's solid. On paper, you're going to get less GPS battery life than the Suunto Race S. You're going to get a lot less than the Coros Pace 3 or the Pace Pro, and about the same as the Forerunner 165 from Garmin. Now, in my tests, it largely lived up to that. I got about 7 days general usage with 5 hours GPS training. That was using the max accuracy mode here for GPS. A 3-hour marathon burned 18%. A 1-hour run on average with max accuracy burned 4 to 5%. A 1-hour run in the GPS only endurance mode burned 4%. 24 hours with no GPS training burned around 13%. Now, I like that you also have a good level of control over that GPS accuracy sort of / battery life performance. You can tweak the settings to eke out more battery life in different situations. Though I think it's worth noting, if you're thinking about this for Ultra, there is no Ultra or Tour power modes, those longest settings, and just 3 GPS recording rates instead of the 4 that you will get on the Race S. When it comes to GPS, for me the GPS performance was good. I was happy with it. It came within a margin for error up against the Garmin Fenix 8 when I ran it over the London Marathon course. Struggled on that run in the built-up areas, Canary Wharf, but then so did the Fenix, so did most watches. On all of my runs, I had a few little wobbles when you get close into the tracks, but there's nothing major. Even in the lower accuracy endurance mode, I did over a 10 mile up against the Fenix 8. It wasn't that far off for the overall distance, and the Fenix 8 was in dual frequency. And the Forerunner 165 as well was in all systems. So a good performance for that kind of, if you want to eke out more battery life by going back to that lower GPS setting, it seemed to do well. So overall on GPS, I think this will do a good job for most runners. There's a lot to like here, I think, from the Suunto Run.
So my likes with the Suunto Run start with the design. I really like little lightweight watches like this, and I do think the Suunto Run has a really nice design that feels quite sturdy and premium for what is a very lightweight, mostly plastic watch at the cheaper end of the spectrum. It does have a nice premium feel on the wrist. The buttons all click satisfyingly and that kind of thing. It's got a snappy, responsive user interface as well, and it is certainly really lightweight and comfortable to wear all the time. I'm a fan of nylon straps in general, and you can swap this one out quite easily. It's a standard 22mm strap, so you can put in other options onto it without any problems at all. The screen is also nice and bright, even under bright sunlight. When I've been out running with the watch, I've been able to read my stats very clearly, and it is a nice screen to use outside your runs as well. Sports features are very much the thing I like the most about the Suunto Run, as you'd expect. This is a really impressive sports watch for the price. Suunto has given it pretty much all the features you get in terms of sports tracking and training analysis on its more expensive watches. Dual band GPS is very much a plus at this price point, something you don't get on the Garmin Forerunner 165, and you've got really detailed training analysis as well, again, which outstrips what you get from Garmin at this price point. Now, this training analysis is powered by Training Peaks, so you're getting all their kind of acronyms and stuff like that, with chronic training load, acute training load. Like, it's all stuff that will make sense after a while. It can be a little bit dense, I think, and unforgiving if you are a very new runner. Then it does look a bit tricky to pass at times, this information, but the level of analysis you get here will satisfy runners of all levels. So I do think it means this is not just a beginner sports watch. I do think this is something that you can grow with, or would satisfy someone like myself as a keen marathoner. You are getting a high level of training analysis, and it's presented pretty well in terms of the colourful widgets on the watch. Also say that although there isn't a dedicated multi-sport sports mode on the watch, you can transition to another activity. If you pause a run, you can then say, I want to go onto a bike ride, and it will measure the transition in terms of time. So that is essentially kind of a triathlon mode, or another multi-sport mode there. I also found the Suunto Run easier to use than past Suuntos. I do think the user interface has been refreshed. It's a little bit more accessible. Stuff like getting interval workouts up and running on the watch just feels easier, and it's just easier to follow them on the watch now, and you can customize more data fields actually within sports modes as well. You don't have to create your own one like I always had to with other Suunto watches. You can also put quite a lot of data on any single data screen during a run, more than you can on the Forerunner 165, for example. So I could get all my stats on there very easily, and just found it just a more enjoyable watch to interact with than I sometimes have with Suunto watches. Dual band GPS has performed well for me in testing, as I expect. Like, I had really good results with the Suunto Race and Race S. I'm getting really good results with the Suunto Run. I've compared it to a Fenix 8, Coros Pace Pro, Forerunner 165, and during all my runs, I've had no odd pacing or distance stats at all from the Suunto Run. I do think it's a really high performer on this front, and yeah, it's great to get dual band GPS in a watch under £200. I think that's a really nifty little feature, and all the GPS tracks have looked really good, so no concerns at all on that front. So yeah, loads of likes there, to be honest, and in general, it's just a watch I've really got on with very well. It's a watch I could definitely use as my daily driver, as, like I say, a keen marathoner, doing lots of training, lots of structured workouts, that kind of thing, getting accurate pacing and distance stats. It's nice to interact with outside of runs, and although this is a watch that is aimed at beginners on paper, I do think it's got everything you need, for runners of every level, especially with the addition of a track run mode, which isn't essential. Like, how far you run on the track, it's all marked in terms of lines, but I actually sometimes have started doing a lot more stuff like threshold sessions on the track where I won't be in lane 1, I'll be in something like lane 4, so being able to set the lane and get accurate distance and pace stats very easily from a watch is quite handy. That's because I'm just trying to avoid too many sharp turns in turn 1 on the track sometimes when I'm doing those longer, more thresholdy sessions.
So starting with the likes, and I think the first big like here is that it's actually a very nice, kind of good looking kind of sports watch, very much sporty in nature and in look, and I quite like that. It's also very compact, kind of small watch, so if that's something you're looking for, then definitely the Suunto Run delivers on that front. It's very much a size of stature that's in keeping with things like the Coros Pace 3, the Garmin Forerunner 165. It's kind of a similar weight and similar level of kind of thickness as well. So I think if you like the look of those watches, I think this is a watch that's going to appeal on that front. I like the fact that it's got, obviously you've got an AMOLED display here now, which brings that AMOLED display technology that Suunto's offered on other watches down to a cheaper price point. It's actually the same size and resolution as the one on the Suunto Race S, which does cost a lot more, and that is a high resolution display compared to the Garmin Forerunner 165 as well. So if you look at other watches and screen technologies in this kind of price range, it does better that on that front. It's a very good quality one overall. I actually quite like this kind of woven nylon strap. We've had other watches kind of introduce these types of straps, and I think this is definitely a good example of one here on the Suunto Run. It's been very comfortable. I like the look of it, and it's very easy to kind of remove if you do want to put in something a bit more durable and kind of workout and run friendly. So design definitely a plus point for me on the Suunto Run. I think in general the run performance has been very good. You've got that dual band GPS here, which we have seen around this price point. Things like the Coros Pace 3 offer that kind of dual band GPS support as well, and it's been very good. I think in general Suunto's approach to that kind of new GPS technology has been very strong, and I think it's more the same on the Suunto Run. So if you're looking for kind of strong GPS performance, that's kind of what I've been seeing in my running time with this watch. Other things worth talking about here. Battery life is obviously a consideration here, particularly when you have an AMOLED display, and we know that AMOLED displays kind of drain that battery a lot quicker. Now, I think the battery life is very much in keeping with the numbers that Suunto talks here, whether that's when you're tracking your runs in that kind of top accuracy, kind of GPS accuracy mode, whether you are using it kind of or seeing the daily drop-off day-to-day with other features, whether it is kind of using it to, track sleep overnight and that kind of drop off overnight as well has been very good. And I found, having used it with the kind of raise to wake, but also the always on display mode, it's been, very much kind of living up to what kind of Suunto promises on those fronts. I think what's been very interesting for me is the charging rates, which I think, is really important here with AMOLED displays, particularly because obviously that is going to drain the battery life quicker, which means you are going to have to charge it on a more regular basis. What I found is the charging rate has been very good. We've seen this on some Garmin watches, where, particularly their AMOLED ones, where they charge very quickly, and that's kind of what I've seen with the Suunto Run. I think I've seen after 30 minutes of charging, it's kind of knocked kind of 40% up onto the battery. So it's not making you wait too long to kind of get out and kind of get running again and tracking for a good kind of week's worth of running. So yeah, definitely some things I've liked about the Suunto Run. Definitely like the design, the general running performance as well, and I do like some things that's happening around the charging front and battery life performance as well too. So into the things I did absolutely love about my time with the Suunto Run, and I'm going to start with software, and there's something I've mentioned with Suunto watches before, particularly the Suunto Race S, the Race, and also the Suunto Vertical. Now I'm talking about software from a performance point of view, and that's kind of interacting with that software, the user interface and how your data is presented, and how, and whether that's real time or kind of post run and in kind of day to day as well. And I think off the watch as well, I think that's really important here, particularly if you're spending a lot of time kind of analysing your data. I just think in general, I think Suunto does need a little bit of kind of work on that front. It's probably lagging a little bit behind some other And the watch brands, I think particularly Garmin, I would say Coros as well. I think from a performance point of view, I do still see some lag with kind of AMOLED watches from Suunto, and that has extended to my time with the Suunto Run, particularly when you compare it to things like the Pace 3, which doesn't have an AMOLED display, but I do think just works a little bit slicker and smoother. And I think looking at an AMOLED watch like the Garmin 4165, again, similarly priced, a little bit more expensive. Again, I just feel it runs a little bit slicker on that front. And then on the other side, I think is the user interface itself. Feels a little bit busy, a little bit clunky. I think you need to work a little bit harder to find where things are. It doesn't just feel as natural in terms of kind of navigating that interface. I think, things just need tightening up a little bit. It definitely has got better, but I do think when you compare it to what else is out there, I think there is still a little bit of work to be done there. And I think the other thing for me is obviously music is a big feature here. Now, the approach to adding music is very similar to other watches. It's drag and drop. You've got to connect it to a computer. That's absolutely fine. That's kind of what we have seen from other brands outside of Garmin, which let you do it on the watches themselves and kind of sync over from kind of third-party streaming services. You can't do that here on the Suunto Run. Now, what I found when I've tried to sync my own files, it takes a while to sync, just one file, and that's one thing, just makes the process of wanting to use that feature a little bit kind of problematic. I think now when I've got kind of using the feature during runs, generally it's fine. The music controls in general work very well. I found there's been an issue where the music has cut out when the kind of voice feedback is kind of in action during runs, and I've had to go into the music controls, unpause the music to let it play again. That's happened, consistently through the runs when I've used the music support. So that's another thing for me. I could go in on kind of heart rate, kind of performance. I think in general, we don't see great optical heart rate performance across most watches and most brands. I don't think I've seen a massive improvement here from previous Suunto watches. Suunto does say there's a different optical sensor here. And in my runs, it's been fine. I definitely have found kind of average, kind of max heart rate readings do tend to be a little bit higher against a chest strap. But you do have the ability to pair kind of external heart rate monitors very easily, just like you can with kind of headphones. And I've managed to pair the Garmin HRM 200 to it, the Polar H9 as well without issues. So if you do want heart rate monitoring or accurate data, then that would be the route I would go. So yeah, those are the main things that I've not absolutely loved about my time with the Suunto Run. Definitely, I think the main thing for me really is around that software, the general presentation and performance of it, which I think Suunto just needs to do a little bit more work on to get it up, better against the competition.
Moving on to some things that I wasn't so keen on then, and I've never really been a huge fan of the Suunto user interface, which I find just a little bit less intuitive than the rivals from Garmin, Polar, Coros. I'm going to give you an example. When I finish a workout, there is no sort of done action button to complete. Garmin asks you to say, are you finished? Which will then take you back to the home screen. With this, you have to swipe back or press the button. Once you know that, that's fine. But you didn't know it the first time round, or, I just want something to confirm that bit has been ticked off. I also find the language of the training load recovery insights somewhat more complicated than you get on Garmin, Polar. Coros I also find a little bit sort of acronym heavy. This one is very acronym heavy. Take training volume, for example. This is shown as a number, which is TSS, or training stress score. Training Peaks fans will know all about this, but if you're not familiar with TSS, this information on the watch, I think it just lacks a bit of context and explanation, particularly if this watch is coming in at a sort of beginner level. It kind of doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. Then there's sort of progress, which is an insight into your fitness. On the glance, you get this will say something like, give you a number like 14 CTL, or what that means is 14 chronic training load. That's basically crunching your training intensity and your duration over the past 42 days to throw up a score that's supposed to represent your overall fitness, so you can benchmark your progress. Again, it's just a number and that acronym, and it's just not very intuitive, not very beginner friendly. It's not very contextual, it's not very human. I want my wearables to sort of be a bit more human with the language they're coming back. Also, my fitness age on this was 20, which I'm not sure is 100% accurate. Now, I often put the optical heart rate performance in my not so good bits section as well. Always feel it's a little bit harsh, as no optical sensor really is perfect in any of my testing. But it's here again for the Suunto Run, as I've got mixed results with this. I tested the run during the London Marathon up against the Garmin HRM Pro Plus. And for that race, the Suunto Run HR was virtually spot on. It was largely within sort of 1 BPM of the chest strap, particularly on the high points on the peaks and when we were up. But it suffered from a few low drops where it dropped much, much lower. Essentially, each time I stopped, it really struggled. And again, during a park run where I did like a run-walk strategy, I was to help my sort of son's 10-year-old get round. It really struggled with some wild high reads. The other thing I'm not a fan of is also having to wait before each run for the Suunto Run to get the heart rate tracking ready. It almost does it after the GPS. Normally you wait for GPS, this you're sort of still waiting. It just feels like a longer wait than I have on other devices. And then the customization on the watch itself is also quite limited. There's a limit to the number of widgets you can show. And then if you want to tweak the data fields of a particular sport mode, you have to do that on the app, not on the watch. It's actually easier to do it on the app than it is on the watch, but sometimes if you want to tweak something last minute before a race or whatever without having to reach for your phone, you can't do that here. I'm also not a fan of Suunto changing the charging dongles constantly between their watches. It's maybe something that we experience more because we're testing. So I've got hundreds of Garmin cables and it's great because I can, there's always one around. Always have to work hard to find that specific cable for this. But also, let's say you're traveling to a city marathon. Chances are, if you forget your Garmin cable, someone in that city marathon or in your group, whatever, is going to have a Garmin cable. Chance of someone having the new Suunto Run cable, much, much lower.
On to the dislikes. I do have a few dislikes here, although I do really like the watch. I would say my dislikes with this watch are pretty minor, and my likes were very strong. So I'm going to mention some stuff here, but it's not really necessarily a major problem, any of this stuff. One of them, just straight off the bat, the step counts are low on this watch. I don't really know why, but if you are someone who's really into step tracking and likes to hit that step target each day, it's surprisingly low, I think, the step counts on the Suunto compared to every other watch I've tested it against. It's not a big deal for me, but it might be for other people. Same goes for the music storage. So I don't use music storage on watch that much. I tend to take my phone with me just so I'm contactable by my family. But if you are going to use that, drag and drop music storage is hard to do. Like my laptop didn't recognize this watch several times and I plugged it in. I had to keep plugging it in and out, resetting things to try and get it to work. And then when I did get it, I was able to drag and drop some old albums I still got with MP3 files and put them on the watch, and that took quite a long time to transfer. Once they were on, it did connect to headphones pretty easily and I could play music easily enough. But if you are using music features, if that is a really big deal for you, I do think the streaming service stuff you get with Garmin or smartwatches makes that a lot easier and more enjoyable to do. I'll say the battery isn't the best on this watch. If you're using the raise to wake screen, you might get a bit more, but I like to have the AMOLED screen always on, and I'm looking at about 3 or 4 days, which is actually bang in line with what I get from the 4 and a 165 when I've been using them side by side. This is a small watch with a pretty big AMOLED screen. It's got dual band GPS. All that stuff's quite taxing on the battery, so it's kind of fair enough, but I don't really mind charging watches that regularly, but you do get an upgrade in battery life by looking at the Suunto Race S, the Suunto Race. The Coros Pace Pro has longer battery as well, so if you want an AMOLED watch but are worried about having to charge it very regularly, you will have to charge this one more regularly than the slightly bigger, more expensive models. And then lastly, the heart rate accuracy. So it's definitely an improvement on the Suunto Run. I'd say that it's been pretty good for me on most of my runs. So this isn't a major concern, but I've had runs where it has read too high, especially at the start of a run, and then I've had a few runs where it just goes a bit wild all over the place. If I'd recorded this about 3 days ago, I'd have been a bit harsher on the heart rate accuracy, but since then I've had 3 really good runs where it nailed a very hard interval session where I was doing 60 seconds on, 30 seconds off. That's really hard in terms of heart rate accuracy, not actually the session itself, and it really tracked those ups and downs very well compared to a chest strap. Pretty good for me today as well. So I think you probably could use the heart rate monitor on this by itself. If you're someone who runs to heart rate or really wants to use the training analysis, I would still pair a chest strap. I say this with every watch. I prefer the security of a chest strap. I don't really mind wearing them, and then you get better data into your training analysis. Heart rate monitor, though, is an upgrade on what I had with the Suunto Race and Race S in terms of accuracy, but yeah, you are going to get the odd stuff that's a bit wrong, and something to look out for pretty much with every watch. So I'm a really big fan of the Suunto Run. It's a watch that very much appeals to everything I want from a sports watch, and it does it at a really good price. Suunto's gone hard at that cheaper end of the market. They've undercut some really big hitters in this area. That would have been the watches I'd have probably bought myself if I was going to buy one. And now I think if I was going to go and buy a new watch right now, as a very keen runner who wants an AMOLED screen, wants dual band GPS, wants those key running and training analysis features, but doesn't necessarily need things like a really long battery life, a very premium metal design, or maps, like breadcrumb navigation is generally good enough for me. This is probably the watch I'd go for because it is cheaper than all those other big hitters like the 4 and the 165, the Coros Pace Pro, that kind of thing, and it performed really well for me during my testing. So yeah, big fan of this watch. The design is nice as well. Everything's worked really well, really fluidly for me, even before it's fully launched. So you're working with the app you never know if there's going to be some bugs there or anything, but everything's been pretty smooth for me all round. And yeah, like I say, unless you need some of those premium features, this has got everything you need, and actually it goes a bit above and beyond what you often get at this price in terms of training analysis, as long as you're able to spend a bit of time getting your head around the various acronyms and stuff that Suunto and Training Peaks use for that kind of thing. So I've mentioned the Garmin Forerunner 165 a few times in this video. I've been wearing it at the same time as the Suunto Run. I do think this is probably the biggest rival to the Suunto Run for runners, and even though the Garmin is a bit more expensive, it's nearly always in sales. Just basically what you've always got to consider with Garmin watches is their prices. Never really the price you have to pay. They always come down in price, and often actually the Forerunner 165 Music will probably be around the same price as the Suunto Run, especially before the Suunto Run starts getting its own discounts. I do think you're getting better sports features on the Suunto Run though. You get dual band GPS. The all systems GPS on the Garmin is very accurate. It's been exactly as accurate as the Suunto during my testing, but if you're looking at city centre running, someone who goes into like canyons, that kind of thing, having the little safety net of the more accurate dual band GPS mode will be nice. You get more training analysis here, you get more customization of data fields. That's quite a big one for me. Like I can only show 4 data fields on the Garmin Forerunner 165 on a run, and I like to basically have, there's 5 I usually want on my main screen for just my general runs. So I do think that's quite important. You get a slightly bigger screen here as well. So yeah, there's lots of going for the Suunto Run compared to the Forerunner 165, even at the same price. The Forerunner does have better music support, has probably a slightly more polished user interface, a few more smart features. Now music, if that is a key feature for you, the Garmin is better, but I think I prefer probably the extra sports stuff you get on the Suunto. But yeah, they're 2 really good watches. I think if one of the features I've mentioned isn't really a big thing for you in terms of the differences, I'd probably just stick with whatever you're on, whether it's Suunto or Garmin's ecosystem, because they're both really good all round. Also around the same kind of price, you've got the Coros Pace 3, which is a memory and pixel watch. I prefer an AMOLED watch, but you will get longer battery life on the Coros Pace 3, which also has dual band GPS, has a very good, I think, user interface now on Coros. It's standardized across the watches. It all makes sense. You get really good training analysis on that watch as well, the same as you get up and down the Coros range. So I do think that's another strong option if you're not too fussed about AMOLED, but I like AMOLED. And then if you want to go and get a maps watch, I think the Coros Pace Pro is a really good value. It's quite a lot more than the Suunto Run, and Coros doesn't really do discounts, but you get a lot of watch for the price with the Coros Pace Pro. You're getting better battery life on that watch, and you are getting full maps. And sometimes that makes a difference. Like I was using a route today on the Suunto Run to use the breadcrumb navigation. You are getting turn by turn. I was basically went into a new area of the forest near me and was just on single track bits, which are much nicer to run at this time of year. They're basically too muddy in the winter, but they're nice at this time of year. I didn't really know where I was going, but I was able to follow a breadcrumb trail pretty easily. So maps are an upgrade for directions, and certainly if you're someone who's always adventuring and always in the great outdoors, I do think those maps are worth the upgrade on some kind of watch, whether you get a Garmin with maps or a Coros with maps or one of the Suuntos with maps. But for general navigation, breadcrumb works very well. And then the other question, I guess, is whether you upgrade to the Suunto Race S. You're getting a more premium design there with more metal involved, and you get maps and the Suunto Plus apps and stuff, a few little extra bits and bobs, but the Suunto Run has everything I need. So they're both really good watches, and I do think it's basically maps and a nice design and a bit more battery life would be the reasons to look at the Race S, which probably wouldn't be enough for me to opt for the upgrade. So yeah, all around an excellent experience for the Suunto Run. I think it's a cracking watch. I love what Suunto's doing. I love the improvements they're making to user interface and just general usability of the watches. I love that they're going hard at those price points. I'm sure it's something that other brands are noticing and will have to compete with. So yeah, great little watch. Definitely one I think runners of any level should be considering.
So my take on the Suunto Run is that if you are looking for an affordable AMOLED multi-sports watch that is a good fit for running, then this is absolutely one to look at. It comes in less than things like the Coros Pace 3 and the Garmin Forerunner 165. So from a price point of view and a value point of view and what you're getting in terms of a running watch experience, there is a lot to like, than not to like with the Suunto Run. Now, if we're looking at it from a perspective of Suunto's other watches, and the next watch up is really the Suunto Race S, which, as already mentioned, has, there's a lot of similarities with the Suunto Run. The main difference is really being that you're not getting that kind of full mapping support. You're not getting the full access to Suunto's kind of plus kind of app ecosystem. You're getting less kind of GPS battery life as well, and a few more sports modes. Now, if you can live without those things, you like the idea of still having an AMOLED display with exactly the same size and resolution as the Suunto Race S. Good battery life overall, I think, good running performance as well, and a lot of the, same metrics and analysis, then the Suunto Run is probably going to be the smart buy to go for if you're sold on the Suunto kind of ecosystem. Now, if you're looking at the other watches that sit around this price, so we are looking at things like the Coros Pace 3, the Garmin Forerunner 165, it's very much in keeping with those watches. It is cheaper, as I said. Personally, I would, based on my experience of the softwares of all of those watches, and if it was my money to spend, I would probably be going for the Coros Pace 3. Now, it doesn't have an AMOLED display, but I think the display is still very good on there. I think the software experience just feels a little bit cleaner, a little bit more slick. I think things like dual band, GPS performance, the music player functionality and smartwatch functionality you're getting on the Coros Pace watch for a little bit more money, I think works a little bit slicker. You're getting good battery life there as well. I think, the ecosystem around the Coros watch on the Pace 3 is very good. If I'm looking at the Garmin Forerunner 165, which is more expensive and you're paying more for that AMOLED display in general, smartwatch functionality just works a little bit better. The user interface, again, on the Forerunner 165 kind of is a little bit nicer, and probably, that's the watch that I would still go for over the Suunto Run. But if you really only have kind of below £200, below kind of $250 to spend, and you're looking for a solid running watch, a compact small one that kind of delivers where it matters most, then the Suunto Run is well worth looking at. If it was my money and I was looking at those other watches, I think I would pay just a little bit more for the Coros Pace 3, despite not having that AMOLED display. I think everything else, I think about it as a package, just works a little bit better for me.
Verdict then, this is a cracking watch from Suunto for the money, hands down. I'm very, very impressed. We've seen Coros land big blows when it comes to bang for buck watches like the Pace 3 and the Pace Pro, but the Suunto Run, I think, actually goes a bit further than those watches. There's a lot to like here. It's a good looking watch with decent battery life, got a bright display, pretty solid GPS, all of that coming in under £200. You're going to be hard pressed to find a more capable watch, a full RRP, than this Suunto Run. There's plenty here for most runners' needs up to a certain point, particularly if you're not too bothered about maps and things like contactless payments and the sort of smart connectivity or smartwatch smarts that you'll get from Apple Watches and all that kind of stuff. It's certainly an excellent tool for beginners with enough features for you to grow into the watch as your running might get more serious. If you want more detailed feedback around your training than just tracking runs, and maybe you sort of start out and then eventually you start training for a marathon, this will do it. I'd also say it's a good option for the casual runners too. If you're just running 2 to 3 times a week for fitness, I think this will do what you need it to do. I wish the training insights language was a little more simple. You'll have to get used to the Suunto interface. But all in all, I think this is a very, very good watch for the money. And yeah, I think it's sort of now up there as one of the top value, if not the top value running watch you can buy right now.
That's our review of the Suunto Run. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.